So one of the things you mentioned is we have to frame therapy in a way that's attractive to men,
Yeah.
right? So how can we do that as, like as a country or as a world?
Well, I think the first thing we need to do is help the world and society understand that if we prioritize men's mental health, we are not ignoring women's mental health. Too many people think of it as a zero-sum game, where if we think about men's mental health, well, what about women then? Well, no one's saying that. Relax, no one's saying that. We're just saying these are two different kinds of people. We want to help everyone. We have plenty of resources to help everyone. We don't have to just have a one-way set, model of mental health. So that's the beginning, to make sure that the society and the world understands that prioritizing one does not mean ignoring the other. It just means we see a need there. And then moving on from there, once the world understands that, we have to get more creative with mental health, just as we've done with women's mental health. With men's mental health, it might be more about going outside, throwing the football around, throwing a baseball around while we're having that conversation. I've written plenty of articles, one about combat sports like boxing and MMA. In the middle of therapy, depending on the man, obviously, yeah, right, the individual. But if they're into that combat sports stuff, like if when you're fighting and you're boxing, like you are physically exerting yourself and you are physically vulnerable because
Yeah.
of your exertion. Now that physical vulnerability opens the door for emotional vulnerability too. And so when I've worked with some of my guys and like, boxed with them or sparred with them and they're just exhausted, I'm exhausted too.
Yeah.
And now, like, we really get to talk about like what's going on with your marriage, what's going on with
Hmm.
your wife. The kids are
Yeah.
going off to school. I don't know how I'm gonna afford the tuition. It's so expensive, man. I'm like drowning, and my boss is up, and like just stressing me out. Like that now comes out. So that generally wouldn't be something that you might consider with women's mental health, women's therapy. One, because it can be very violent to spar with a client,
Yeah.
but that's just one option that you can explore.
Okay, great. Yeah. So basically, you're saying like frame it in a way that doesn't make men feel like, they just have to sit in one spot and stagnated and just kind of be in like this overly emotional space. Because as you mentioned, men like to be more action oriented, and you can see it, with people that have played sports, right? Because if you've played sports, you know the kind of bond you build with, the people that you've played that sport with. Like it lasts a lifetime. Like
Yeah.
it'll last a lifetime because like you've made memories together and you've suffered together in a way that will bring you closer together, which now allows you to really confide in each other without feeling like, oh man, I'm weak and helpless, because you've already shown each other that you're not by being on, for example, the basketball court
Yeah.
or in the boxing ring and so on and so forth. And yeah, that's something that leads on to the next point, which is pretty much the main focus of what you talk about, being action oriented and setting goals, right? Now, what does that really mean? Like, what kind of actions are the most effective when it comes down to dealing with men's mental health? And what kind of goals are the most effective when it comes down to dealing with men's mental health?
Right. Well, the actions might differ from man to man, but some of the actions might be, if we want to play video games, let's say we're not athletic, right? Or just older like I am. So we just want to play video games. We got NBA 2K in there and we're just playing and playing and playing. And we just talk through, and maybe we put it on mute. So this way the sound doesn't interfere, right? So we're playing NBA 2K on mute and we're just talking to one another. That could be an actionable thing. And as far as the goals are concerned, this is an important part, is that men need to know what is it that we're going to achieve today in this 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, and how will I know that this hour and a half has been well spent? And also give me an idea of what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be accomplishing next week when we meet again for an hour and a half. So knowing what we're trying to achieve today, and also knowing how it relates to the larger thing that we're trying to accomplish over the course of, let's say, 3 months to 3 years, that can be very helpful because men will always look back retrospectively and ask, was that worth it for me to do? Well, if you have a listing of like, this is what we achieved last week and the week before that and the week before that, oh, I see the progress that I've been making. That's going to keep men motivated to keep coming back. They need tangible, logical evidence that therapy has been working for them. And many times with therapy, it's not like a wound. Like you get a cut and like you see it healing up. With mental health, the wounds as they heal up, you feel like they've always been healed. And so sometimes you kind of need to be reminded of where you were 3 years ago in order to understand the progress that you've made. And just marking that can be a really valuable goal.
Okay, so having these like daily tangible goals that show progress, kind of like so you can actually see it, that's more motivating for men when it comes down to therapy, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously you mentioned video games and so on and so forth. When it comes down to goals, for example, like obviously because, we can't have, people playing games all day long because if then you're not going to actually help society. Obviously, we have guys that are getting paid to play games. That's a really small percentage of people, right? So in general, like when it comes down to setting goals and being action oriented, do you find that it's more beneficial for men's mental health to focus on like physical goals, financial goals, or like goals in terms of their romantic relationships and friendships? Like which one of those, or is it a combination of three? Like which one tends to be most effective in helping men?
Goals that are not reliant on others. So the third would be something that I would stay away from, because
Oh,
if you
friendships and relationships.
yeah,
Yeah.
because friendships and relationships, like, people don't have to be your friend. People don't have
Yeah.
to be your boyfriend or girlfriend or anything like that. So, you know, y- outsourcing and having an external locus of control can be pretty harmful. But you can control what time you wake up. You can control how much you lift at the gym, how often you go out and, like, do cardio, how often you read books. Like, you are in full control of that. That's an internal locus of control. So any perception or any treatment plan that includes an internal locus of control, where that individual man is in control of everything, can be much more valuable than where there are external loci of control. Because if something falls apart with a friendship or a relationship, which I encourage people to engage in.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not saying that don't have a girlfriend or don't have friends. I'm saying that that shouldn't be your primary source of self-esteem and self-efficacy, because if it is, you're relying on something else and someone else.
Got it. Yeah. So it seems like the main idea is to be fully comfortable with yourself first,
Yeah.
right? So, to get your validation first prior to kind of, like really depending on other people's validation to give you that sense of self worth and respect. So it seems like the main thing here is just to make men respect themselves.
Yeah.
That's kind of like the main thing, right? Because oftentimes in therapy, it's more about like loving yourself, which is important.
Yeah.
It's important, but like it seems like based on your work and like what you've really witnessed, it's more about respecting yourself, right?
It is. It's about respecting yourself, but also, this is going to be a little bit of a hot take, in a society that disrespects men.
Yeah,
Men are,
yeah,
every film that you watch, every comedy, the dad or the man is always a Dumbo that just doesn't know what's going on. And everybody
yeah.
else, even the kids, the 5, 10-year-old kid knows more than the dad does. So in a society that is designed to disrespect men, men have to learn to respect themselves. Yes.